This is not good. You don't want these types of things happening to you, and so today's video is going to be talking about ways to avoid this. Hi everyone, this is David with Tigner Adventures, and my wife Ninette and I and our cat Tansy, we live in our motorhome full-time. And one of the things that I see quite often is things like this happening to people that are new to RVing, and actually it happens to people that have been doing it for a while too. But in this particular case, this instance, they've driven this for 20 miles, and this is what's happened so far. So we're going to talk about some things like when you're going to drive a big rig, maybe to look at inside and outside, maybe to help you back up a little bit better, things like that. That's what we're talking about today. So to start with, we're going to start on the inside and just look at our gauges here. When I actually sit in my seat, this is what I see. And your vehicle may be different, especially if you're a diesel pusher. You may have some air gauges, things like that, but they're all basically the same. They're going to have, hopefully they're going to have some kind of gauges and some lights that go along with those. So the first thing that we're looking at here is we see our speedometer and fuel, which is important, but that's not the ones I'm going to concentrate on right now. So as we're traveling, there's 3 gauges here that I keep my eye on all the time, and that is on the bottom here we have the oil gauge, temperature gauge, and then our charging, which is how much the alternator is putting out. So I kind of keep an eye on those. That's where they're normally at, and yours may be different, but the key here is if they change, that's when you want to be looking into what's going on. So for example, when my alternator went out, instead of being over here by almost 14, my needle was clear down to 10, which was down into the red, and so all of a sudden it's like, oh, I got some kind of problem here. Same way with my temperature gauge. When I was having issues with my fan clutch, was that the temperature was going up to almost 350, and that's when I lost all my water and we overheated. So those are things that I want to keep my eye on. And of course the oil pressure, you want to make sure you have oil pressure. So if that all of a sudden starts dropping down, then you definitely need to pull over and turn your engine off as fast as you can, otherwise you end up ruining your engine. So these are my gauges. This is what I look at as I'm driving. Yours is going to be different, or could be different, and they may be in different places. Besides those 3 gauges, I also keep an eye on my RPMs. So RPMs is how many revolutions the engine's turning per minute, and this is how fast it's going. And so the slower it's going, then typically the better the fuel mileage you're going to get. The higher it's going, then you're not going to get as good a mileage, but you're going to have more pulling power. So as you're climbing hills and things, it's gonna have to rev up and stuff. Otherwise, you're gonna actually lug the engine, and it won't work very well. So anyway, so I keep my eye on here, and if you notice here, I have placed this little yellow needle up about 3,800. I try to keep my RPMs below 4,000. Now this engine's 25 years old, so the specs on it probably were redlined at 4,000. I don't know, but I don't really know, and this gauge doesn't really tell me, but on the newer vehicles, a lot of times you'll have where it'll turn yellow and then it'll turn red, saying you shouldn't be that high. For example, on my car, my red line is actually 6,000 RPMs, which is, I can't even imagine even getting that high, but that's the red line. And so, each engine's a little different. So you have to look at what's your setting and where you feel comfortable running that engine. So typically when I'm going along at 60 miles, 65 miles an hour, normal RPMs is right around where it's at right now, about 2,500. When I kick it into overdrive, you'll see that it jumps up quite a bit. In this case, we're at about 3,400 at 65. That's just kind of going along a straight level road, and I'm going up over an overpass or something like that. It might kick up there, but normally I'm not running this high of RPMs, 35 to 4,000, unless I'm climbing a hill, and typically when I climb a hill, I'm only going about 35. So I'll have it in second gear and just climbing up the hill and just steadily moving up the hill, and I'm going to be about 35 to 3,800 RPMs. So I mentioned when I'm climbing, I go to second gear. So that's something else that's important to keep an eye on, is if you are going up and down, your transmission has to keep going in and out of overdrive. It starts heating up the automatic transmission fluid. And so if I'm going up a hill and it's a long climb and it kind of goes back and forth a little bit, I'll just put it into second gear, and then that way it keeps it there and it doesn't keep shifting up and down as it's going along. And so it helps keep the engine a little bit cooler, and so that works out pretty well. The other thing I keep an eye on when I'm actually stopping or I'm going downhill, or anytime I push on my brakes basically, is Roadmaster. I have this little alert thing here, and this goes on every time I push my brakes on, and this is the braking that's happening in my car. So this tells me that my brakes are on in my car, and if I let off my brakes and on the motorhome and that light continues to stay on, then I know I have a problem. And so I kind of keep an eye on that as I'm going too. So a few different things to kind of keep your eye on and watch as you're driving down the road. But these are important things as far as driving a big rig, and something that's carrying this much weight. We've got to kind of keep our eye on all these different things. By the time red lights come on, sometimes that's way too late, and we don't have time to react. So just kind of keep glancing at these things as you go along, and then that way, and it gets to be natural after a while. You just kind of glance at them, and not a big deal. The other thing that you do now that you're sitting in the driver's seat is keep an eye on your mirrors. And if you look here, I can look out my mirrors, and I'm actually sitting in a resort right now, but if I sit here and look, I can see what's behind me by looking at my mirrors, and that's the whole purpose, is to kind of keep an idea what's coming up. Those big trucks that come by, they kind of blow you to the side a little bit, so if you kind of keep an eye on that, then you're kind of prepared for it a little bit. Also, we're going to kind of talk about backing up, and I'm going to talk about backing into places, but using your mirrors is very, very critical when you're driving a big rig, because you do not have your rear view mirror like you do in your car. So you get so used to in a car driving that you're looking up at the rear view mirror. I don't, because I'm always driving bigger rigs that always have side mirrors, so I always look at my side mirrors. I very seldom ever look in my rear view mirror, and as time goes on, you'll get the same way. You'll just start using your side mirrors on your car also, because this just a habit basically. But when you're looking out these mirrors, the things you're just kind of, you want to make sure that you can see behind you. And if I usually have it so when I'm just driving along, I can see things on the left or right, but I don't necessarily see my rig. So if you look here, I can see stuff back there, but I don't see the side of my rig. I have to actually move my head over to the side just a little bit to actually see a clear view of the side of the actual side of the rig. Now, the reason I do that is because my mirrors are actually then facing out away from my rig a little bit more, giving me a little bit more of a view on the side of my rig, what's really happening as rigs are coming up next to me and things like that. I get to see them a little bit longer in my mirror, compared to if it was just tight against my vehicle. So that's might be a personal preference. I think it works very well for me, but you might want to look into that.
All right, come back.
Okay, how close am I?
You'll be okay. You'll be okay. All right. Okay, stop.
So backing up a rig is can really be nerve-wracking, because especially if you're by yourself. I have done this by myself. I feel for those solos out there that have to do this by themselves all the time. It's much easier to back up when you have a spotter behind you. So if you're in a park, it actually is not uncommon to ask your neighbors, hey, could you spot me while I'm going back, because you don't want to damage your rig by backing into the post, or a lot of times what happens is people back over the water spigot, and then the water's out for the whole park. So everyone's always happy to help you, so just ask, because it can be really nerve-wracking. So the next thing we want to talk about is the knowing your limitations based on the length of your rig. And also the length, not just the full length of your rig, but the length from your back tire to the very back of the rig. So I stick out here 10 feet, And so if I was to turn sharp, my tail actually swings around almost 8 feet out. And so it's important to know that, if you're right next to a car next to you and you're trying to make a right turn, it's better to take up both lanes, if it's a real tight turn, because you've got to pull out there far enough to get past that car before you start moving your tail out. And it's also the same at a gas pump. When you're at a gas pump and you're pulling away from the gas pump, make sure you completely clear the pump before you start actually turning. Otherwise, that's why they have those little concrete barriers by the pump, which helps to protect them, but it really can make a mess of your rig. So the other reason you want to know what the length is behind your tire is because you can get into this situation where you get your back end stuck because you went down into a hole. With a little bit of planning and practice, this can become a lot easier for you. And one of the ways to do that is actually just go over to an empty parking lot. It's nice if it has lines because you can use those as guides, but you can practice making turns. I know when I first got my car set up as flat towing, I went over to the parking lot and turned as sharp as I could. I wanted to see if it was going to jackknife the car or break something or whatever. So I did all that testing ahead of time before I actually got out on the road. You can do the same thing, and one thing to understand is if you have a car dolly, it usually hangs over farther, and you can test going around sharp corners and see how much further in that turns compared to like when you're flat towing, for example. But with the lines there, it makes it simple for measuring all that stuff. And the other thing is backing up. Learn to use your mirrors, and in a parking lot you can back up along the lines to get used to trying to keep it nice and straight. When I just out of high school, when I actually started driving big rigs, for my test, I actually had to back down this curvy road for a quarter of a mile just using my mirrors. And so that's why, I feel real comfortable using mirrors now, because that's how I got tested and trained. And so you can do the same kind of thing in a parking lot and just back up through the different parking stalls, whatever it may be. And that holds true for a trailer also. So, go to the parking lot, practice backing your trailer up. It's different than backing up a motorhome or a Class C motorhome type of a setup that's got, anything like a van or any of that. That's all way different than backing up a trailer. And so it's important that you actually go out and you practice those things before you get yourself into situations that really are tough, tough to get out of. Okay, well, that's it. Hopefully this is some information that you can use. I know when I first started driving big rigs and trucks and things like that, it was nerve-wracking, trying to keep track of what was in front of me, where I was going and everything, and I was so long, and then trying to worry about my tail swing and not taking out the car next to me, not hitting things and whatever, and then, it was just one thing after another. And so after years and years of driving, it's become second nature to me. And so that'll happen to you too. So don't worry about it too much. Just kind of take it slow and be safe. That's the main key here thing. And just take care of your rig, and you'll be just fine. So anyway, we'll go ahead and say goodbye for now, and we'll hope you see you down the road, and maybe you'll be on our next video. So take care.